We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Mantry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. And as our listener Gurinder pointed out, with the past few weeks when Tom has been here, but since he's still on his laptop and headset, just been a logo on our YouTube videos. We had it backwards. Tom is the voice inside of my head, not me being the voice inside of Tom's head. That's how that must work. Because you can see me on YouTube.
I don't know. I mean, if you think about it, would you have the dumb voice inside your head or the smart voice inside your head? I feel like
which
I
way
must
are we
be
saying
the
that
inside
goes?
the voice. I'm saying I'm definitely the dumb
That
voice,
is not
and
true.
that's
We have
fine.
two smart voices on this podcast. Let's be kind to ourselves. It's 2020. Someone has to be.
I could agree with that. I'm the voice inside your head insofar as I'm the one who's going to say the thing that Rob is thinking, but is not willing to say out loud because of the whole Canadian thing.
I will give you more credit in that you are the more creative and more humorous of the two of us, and so it's good compliments all around.
We have.
I'm the dry information guy. I've whenever I was in drama class and that, I was always the better straight man than the humorous one, and I don't mind that role.
You were the was it Costello? Costello was the straight man, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
Abbott was the little guy, right?
Yeah.
So I'm the Abbott.
Sure.
I wouldn't mind. We could. Hey, if we ever meet in person, we should do the who's on first.
Yup, we could do that.
About once every 3 years, I remember about that skit, and I'll find it on YouTube and show it to my kids, and it just kills. It kills every time.
And it really is
the
the delivery, because if you just read the transcript, it is not nearly as funny as the performance.
Oh no, no, it's all about the delivery. All right. This is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. That is the way you get your question answered. If you do not do it in that way, there is no guarantee that your question will be answered. But if you want to contact us in different ways, we have our website where you can leave a comment. Avrant.com. You can go to facebook.com/avrantpodcast, youtube.com/avrant. You can contact us directly, Rob at avrant.com. His Twitter is at FirstReflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter is at avrant_Tom. My tongue suddenly feels thick.
Oh.
I'm like, has that ever happened to you? Where you're like talking, all of a sudden, like it feels like you're going to bite your own tongue.
Yes.
As your mouth
usually
goes up.
on the sides. That's typically where I feel
right.
if it does that.
Yes.
No.
Yeah, that's very strange. I'm going to take a sip of this very cold water.
Yeah, yeah. It can be a sign of dehydration. So, and given how much you have been working on your house, that would not be a surprise. Plus,
last
you're in
night,
Florida.
so the kids climb, just so that you understand my risk, my aversion to risk, or my acceptance of risk. The kids climb with the climbing team on Mondays and Thursday nights. The gym is closed.
Okay.
So there's nobody there except for the team kids and the coaches and stuff. So, it's maybe 40 people in the entire gym, which is great because and everybody's required to wear a mask or they get kicked off the team, which is nice because then I don't have to worry about anybody not wearing a mask, which has been very, very helpful. But so Monday, I said to my wife, I said, they're doing tile. Over the weekend, I found out. I mean, I don't know how. I had a conversation apparently at one point where the contractor said, "Oh, we're going to paint the walls whatever color you say, and generally what we do is do semi-gloss on the trims and the doors." I'm like, that sounds great. That's fine. But he might have also said semi-gloss ultra pure white, which I didn't register. I just thought he's going to put semi-gloss of the same wall color on the trim.
I mean, it's pretty
which is
common to do a contrasting color and often just pure white as the trim. That's not unusual.
it is. It's not unusual at all. It was just I didn't realize
Ah.
that. So when we did all the painting the last couple of
Mm,
weeks, we painted all the doors and trim the same color as the wall because that's what I thought we
I
were
see.
doing. And then nonchalantly, casually in the text when he was talking to me about something else, he mentioned that the baseboards were being, painted the ultra pure white. I'm like, wait, what? So for the last couple of weeks, last week we paint. I came in all weekend and repainted all the doors and the
Ah,
trim, except the ones that were going to the new
okay.
bathroom because they were still they hadn't been full. They had some sanding to be done on them. They're not fully done yet. So that contractor I thought was going to come in and do it on Monday, but he didn't
Right.
because he said I told him he didn't have to, and I was like, okay, doesn't sound like something I would say, but I guess I did. So last night I said, when my wife got home from work, I said, "You're not going to like this, but tonight I'm going to go to the house and I'm going to repaint those doors. I'm just going to do it, make sure it's done before the tile guys get to that
Right.
point, because I don't want to spill paint on our
Yes.
brand new
Yeah.
tile." She said, "Oh, so you're not going to go climbing?" I went, "No, no, I'm going climbing.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
going. Don't be ridiculous. I'm going climbing. It's like the one thing I live
Mm.
for. No offense, children and wife, but it's the only thing that gives my life meaning. Thank you. I'm going climbing. That's happening." So, so 10:30 at night last night, I come in here, start painting.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, I'm a little
Uh-huh.
tired. I'm a little over this whole house thing. I'm just over everything. Just
Well, then
over
you'll
it.
be happy to know we're just overloaded with news and questions this week. So yeah,
I am.
you
I'm
got
not.
that
I
too.
not only am I actually today because I did all that painting last night. There was nothing that I needed to do over here today, so I actually read through the questions today.
All
I don't know
right.
if that's going to make me any better prepared than I would normally be, but I did read through the questions. So before we get to our questions, let's thank our listeners of the
Mhm.
week. To become a listener of the week, you have to support this podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to patreon.com and sign up to be one of our patrons. A patron is a person who is a continuing supporter of the podcast. Monthly, they give money through patreon.com. We have right now 125 patrons, including Paul, who sent us a lovely message, which I guess we'll read later. So thanks to all of our 125
Well, that
patrons.
was the message that you forwarded me via email. So I didn't reprint that in the notes here. I guess I could look it up in email. But yeah, no, patreon.com/AVRant podcast. That is
Oh, right. It should be on. I was like, well, I don't have that on this computer. I'm like, yes, I do. I only have one computer. What am I talking about? Hold on, I can find it.
Patreon.com/AVRant podcast is the way that you can sign up to support us automatically with you choose the dollar amount, as little as $1, as much as you please. And Paul, thank you very much for being one of our 125 patrons this week. It's very nice.
And Paul says he loves the podcast. It's taught him so much, and he may be calling on our advice soon. So keep up the good work and stay safe. So thank you,
Thank
Paul.
you, Paul.
We will. We will stay
Mhm.
safe as much as we can. We also got some notes of gratitude from Chris, Terry, Alongo, Michael, Mark, Carl, Vince, who is glad specifically that Rob secured his PS5 and Xbox Series X pre-orders because he wants to hear the best settings for them come November. Don't enable him, Vince.
I will provide
Don't
those,
enable
though. I
him.
will provide.
And Jay and Aras. So thank you, all of
For
you
sure. I'll
peoples.
repeat the names: Chris, Terry, Ilongo, and I did want to mention Ilongo is in quite the situation in his work life, and he was what is even the word? Ridiculous that he apologized for being behind on podcasts. That he is the last person on earth who should be apologizing for anything.
Do I know? Do we know what his thing is, or do you know? But we don't
I
know.
don't know all the details. I just know the field in which he works, which yes is being
Ah,
affected by the pandemic that is going on right now. I'm not going to share things that I don't know if you want
that's
shared.
fine.
I'll
That's
leave it
fine. That's
vague,
fine.
but
That's fine.
I
That's
just
fine.
wanted to say that because Alongo, you have of all the people, absolutely nothing to apologize for in being behind on our podcast here. But yes, Michael, Mark, Carl, Vince,
Can't
Jay,
even carve out 2 hours a week to listen to us. Alongo,
right?
God. How do you even live with yourself, sir?
And Aris, don't want to leave him off. We really do appreciate the notes of gratitude and encouragement that roll in. It is very nice to read every week, so very much appreciate it. And a thank you to everyone from us for continuing to listen and sending in your questions.
That's right. That's right. That's right. All right, let's go to the news here. Amazon held their product press event last week. All the Echo devices are spheres now. That's right, spheres. Yep. They already did dongles, and they did cubes, squares.
Cylinders, now spheres. They got 2 tweeters and 1 woofer that points up for some reason. Well, what else is it going to do in a sphere?
I was going to say, what's the other option,
and,
Rob?
And the dot.
This looks so much like a Bang & Olufsen design.
Or an orb. It looks very much like an orb speaker. But yeah, the Echo Dot now has the option to come with a clock in it. It used to as well, but now it's a spherical clock. So yeah.
Yeah. All right, so here's some information about that. The Echo Show, with its 10-inch screen and camera, has motors in it so that it can always be pointed at you. And Amazon swears they aren't tracking your face, just your general shape. I have been one of the most vocal supporters that I know, or maybe apologists for all the smart home devices saying, oh, people saying they're listening to you and stuff like that. It's just ridiculous. Dude, when it starts following you around the room, it's a little hard to make the argument that they're not really listening, that they don't really care. I mean, I understand the convenience factor of this. This is creepy. If you're going to do that, you need to put that little HAL light on the top front of it.
Oh, yeah, that'll make it less creepy.
Just go full horror show on it. That's what I say. Full science fiction horror show. Make the 2020 bingo card of now my electronic devices look at me as I'm walking around the house naked. Yes.
Make it the emoticons from Moon, where
right.
That's even better.
This one I did see. The Ring security cameras are expanding into your car, and also as flying drones called the Ring Always Home Cam. It flies around inside your house on a set path for security reasons.
Yeah, that's what they say.
I guess
it's Ring.
They say you can check it if you left your windows open from your phone. They swear it isn't recording until it's flying along its path. It's noisy, but that's a feature, not a bug, since anyone in your house will know it's coming, which kind of defeats the point of it being a security thing. But at the same time, there was that Tom Selleck science fiction vehicle called Runaway or something like that. Is that the one with the little spider things? This feels very much
honestly,
like that,
seeing the images of it with a model's hand, it's a little bit bigger than I thought at first. That's not
well, and the camera is hidden. The camera is on the downward
when it's in its
stick,
charger.
So
it's concealed within. Okay.
Right. I mean, to me, it's just a handheld fan. You turn the thing on and you point it at yourself. You just, so hot in here. Oh my god. Oh. I'm svelting over here. I don't know how to do it, whatever that is. I don't know if svelting is a word. It might not be. Anyways, the biggest news is the upcoming launch of Amazon Luna, which is their own streaming gaming service. It'll work via Fire TV devices or directly on your PC and Macs. iOS gets it via a web app, since Apple is still fighting everyone about streaming gaming services in their app store because Apple. And Android support will come later. Firmware update coming from Emotiva, even though there's no exact launch date on that Android support.
Or on the service in general, for that matter.
Yeah. So they're coming at things a little differently than Google Stadia or Xbox Cloud Gaming. First, Amazon Luna is the name of the whole system. It's the overall thing. The backbone is the AWS or Amazon Web Services, where almost every website you've ever visited is hosted from at this point. It is integrated with Twitch, which makes sense since Amazon owns them. And there is a $50 Luna controller you can buy that connects directly to the servers via Wi-Fi rather than connecting to your playback device via Bluetooth, which is somehow, through the magic of wishful thinking, going to reduce latency. I can't imagine
one less
how
hop.
Connecting to the what
instead of the controller going Bluetooth to your device and then your device going Wi-Fi out to the servers, now your device and the controller both talk to the server directly. So it's supposed to save you like 7 milliseconds because people are going to be using Luna for really competitive gaming.
Yeah. We're getting gaming is quickly getting to the point of like watts and amplifiers
Yeah.
where it's like just stop talking about it. It's stupid. All right, so it's a $6 a month subscription called of course Luna
Yep.
Plus. Thank
You
you,
gotta have
Disney.
a plus
You've ruined
symbol.
everything. You've now tried to you've succeeded in finally ruining math. Disney has finally ruined math. Thank you, Disney. What's next? You already ruined princesses. Jeez. All right, and that gets you. I don't know how have they really ruined them? I think they've started to make them better, but for a while, it wasn't sending the girls the best messages. Anyways, that gets you unlimited access to a bunch of games that Amazon has directly paid to license, but then they will also have other gaming channels. Ubisoft, of course, Ubisoft no, who has never seen the opportunity to grab money and not take two big handfuls of it, is already on board, and they plan to partner with many more gaming companies. They envision the whole thing being similar to the various streaming video services. Want Ubisoft games? Subscribe to the Ubisoft channel. Want EA games? Separate subscription for the EA channel. And don't worry, they'll be in the EA channel. And in fact, there'll probably be multiple EA channels. There'll
Right.
be EA Sports channels and the EA first-person shooter channels, or EA, Call of Duty only
EA
channels.
Star Wars that they still somehow have the license to seemingly in perpetuity, despite having released all of like 2 or 3 games in the past decade.
That's how Fox kept that stupid X-Men
Yeah,
franchise
right.
too. Don't forget that. Conceivably, Xbox Game Pass could become a channel if Microsoft wants to do things that way, though. I don't know. It's Amazon. They're big enough that they doesn't have to fail if they don't want it to fail. But I don't know, man. I don't know about this. I don't know about all these streaming gaming services.
Well, I mean, what is kind of interesting and potentially valuable in the long run is that we have all these various giant companies trying out different business models. So we're
Right.
gonna find out one way or the other what sticks and
What
what
works
doesn't.
and what doesn't.
So
Yeah.
in that sense, it's a decent experiment.
Yeah. They're not getting any of my money. Zero of it. My kids keep asking for games. My son, my youngest one in particular, will like, Daddy, I've heard about this game and blah blah blah, and let me tell you about it. I'm like, huh? He tells me about it. Can I get it? No. He's all 20% off. No. Better be 20% off is zero because that's how much I'm willing to pay for it. You don't need. Uh-oh.
Something beeped.
Yeah, that's not a good sound. That usually means the power has fluctuated.
Oh, is that your APC?
No, it's not. It's Panamax, but it's the same. It's the battery backup.
Similar idea.
But I still have internet.
Uh-huh.
So it must have been, it didn't kick the router off? Okay, well,
Roll on.
I guess when there's only 2 light bulbs going off in the house right now, there's not a lot of power being drawn. The capacitors were still full. All right, KEF. KEF has updated their LS50 and LS50 wireless speakers. They're the new $1,500 pair LS50 Meta, which are speakers that think about sound while they're playing sound.
They're speakers
meta.
about speakers.
That's right. There's speakers that you buy that have 2 other speakers that those speakers listen to. And you get to watch them listen to those speakers because they're meta. Yep. The first time I saw that name, I was like, no one in the room. No one in the room made this joke. I was the first that thought of it. Really?
It's
Come on,
printed
guys.
right on them. That's the name.
I'm telling you, every single major company should run every single name by me first. Every single one. And people like me in different languages. Like 100% sure, because this would never have passed muster.
I mean, they should have called it LS50 Plus. Come on now.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, math is already dead. But you should make it a double plus, All right. Or not equal to. So it's $1,500 a pair for the LS50 Meta. It's $2,500 a pair for the LS50 Wireless 2, which are not wireless Meta for whatever reason. Speakers, they look very similar to their predecessors, but there have been some external changes to the cabinets and ports. And the Wireless 2 now has an HDMI ARC input and the option to connect the left and right speakers, either with an Ethernet cable or wirelessly with separate power cords for each speaker, obviously. But the big marketing push is the use of a metamaterial acoustic absorber instead of traditional insulation. 30 mathematically calculated tubes have been curved and molded into an ABS plastic disc that reduces frequencies between 600 Hz and 5 kHz by as much as 99% within the cabinet behind the LS50's drivers. That's amazing. I don't really see what the point is, but it's super amazing.
Instead of stuffing, you get a plastic disc.
Well, I think they also have stuffing, though. I think they have
They
both.
said they don't. I mean, I haven't cut one of these open to see, but they said they don't have stuffing.
I would be surprised if they didn't at least. I mean, there's all that empty space. You might as well put something there while you're at it. So for the wireless 2, usability is improved with more ways to connect, more services supported, and its own KEF Connect app that allows you to tune the output of the speaker as well. Amplification power has been increased, and it gets the same metamaterial absorber in the 12th generation UniQ driver as the LS50 Meta. An anonymous listener wrote in to ask if we really think these new versions will be an audible upgrade and whether we think the price can be justified over the ELAC Unify speakers that go for $600 a pair. Will the LS50 Meta really be $900 better? The LS50s are really good.
LS50s are really good. I would have already said that the original LS50 are, in a side-by-side comparison, a noticeable upgrade to the ELAC Unify. Yeah. Now, that is not to put down the ELAC Unify whatsoever.
Right.
Really good. Right. I thought the LS50s were a standout speaker, and I wasn't alone in thinking that. No. Now, I mean, as much as we've made fun of the Meta name, which obviously they took from the metamaterial, it is a real legitimate thing that if you can reduce the strength of the back wave inside of the cabinet of the speaker, that is a good thing, not just for the resonance that occurs inside of the hollow cavity of the speaker and the sound that comes out of the port, but also for the linear control of the driver itself. When you have that sound resonating inside the cabinet, and it can then put pressure back onto the back surface of the driver, there are these small little distortions that occur inside of a speaker that way. So when you can reduce that in an efficient way, like they seemingly have done here, and the science is sound on how metamaterials work. So yeah, this could be a legitimate, objectively measurable improvement in terms of distortion, particularly intermodulation distortion. Now, how truly audible that will be to our ears, comparing it to the LS50. Of course, there are already some of the marketing videos that they've sent out to various influencers who are over the moon about it, but they were just as effusive about the original LS50. So when they say, oh, it's such a big change, I don't really put a whole lot of stock into that. But this could be a genuinely, objectively measurable improvement. So I don't completely dismiss it. Not at all.
Right. I really worry. What Rob's saying is true. You know, that back wave within the cabinet does have a measurable impact. But normally, you know, what I'm worried about is the resonance of the cabinet itself and how it resonates. You know, what frequencies it resonates at, and all that to me is more of a problem, and that's not going to happen at 600 hertz and up. You know, it's going to be much lower. Yes, because
all the bass is still just normal acoustic properties happening for all of the bass.
Right. Yeah. And that's why I'm like, okay, metamaterial, great, dude, but why not still put the insulation there? You know, that's at least going to try to get down to some lower frequencies, and it certainly is not going to hurt anything, right? But my guess is that this is a arguably measurably better speaker. I would wonder, like, subjectively how much better I would think it was over the original. You know, what we will see, though, and what is important, is that when they come up with a technology like this, they do it for a speaker like this so that they can then, you know, start mass producing it and start putting in their other lower end speakers, which would really benefit from this.
Yeah, like the Q series that occasionally has a somewhat resonant cabinet, If you
Right.
can stop a good portion of the mid-range and treble back wave at the surface of the driver itself, which is the whole idea of this plastic disc on the back of the driver, that could have a real and audible impact on a lower end. It's not exactly cheap in KEF's case, but still comparatively lower end series of speakers there. So I mean, I'm not going to tell somebody, yeah, go buy some $1,500 per pair LS50 metas, and whether you like them or not, you're stuck with them. I mean, the good thing about KEF is they're widely available at a large range of
Right.
retailers where you can return them if you don't like them. I think if you're coming from ELAC Unify, that you might enjoy an audition and you might decide that they are worth the price. I can't tell you whether it's $900 better, because that's going to be different from person to person. But I would expect them to be an audible improvement over the ELAC Unify, even though you're starting at a really good point already.
Right. All right, the Roku has a new $99 Roku Ultra model and supports Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos. It can also use the new AV1 codec. Of course, the apps themselves have to support these formats, but at least the hardware won't be what's holding you back. It's expected to ship October 15th.
Yeah.
So that's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still no sign of HBO Max, but Peacock is there now. You know.
Oh. At the very first officially certified ultra high-speed HDMI cable has arrived. JCE, or Johnson Components and Equipment, obtained the certification from the HDMI LLC on September 21st for their passive cable design, up to 5 meters. 16.4 feet. Apparently, some of the very early NVIDIA RTX 3090 graphic card testers got them in order to test 8K gaming. They are reportedly thick and very stiff. Title of your sex tape. Couldn't find any prices yet. So
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah. So beats the 3 feet that we had before in unofficial testing. But in order to get there, you're not getting a thin, flexible cable, which is no surprise.
That's not a real.
Yeah, 48 gigabits per second is nothing to sneeze at in a cable that
we're quickly getting back towards the garden hose stage of cabling. Yeah. The good old days of garden hose cabling. This is nice.
I mean, when the whole scheme of how the signal is transmitted is based on timing, and you're starting to send things at that rate, yeah, you're getting into some where physics starts getting strange sometimes. So.
Right.
Anyway,
don't worry, they're going to come out with quantum cables soon. Quantum Plus.
It's good that that we've at least got one official ultra high speed HDMI cable now.
All right, some comments here from our listeners. Karl just wanted to report that not only is Peacock available on Roku now, but that it also seems to be the best hardware for use for Peacock at the moment. Unlike the version on Apple TV, automatic frame rate switching is working on Roku, and unlike Android TV, 5.1 audio is working on the Roku. So there you go.
That's good. The latecomer is winning.
Both of you people watching the Peacock right now.
That's right. I mean, they do have a free tier as long as you're willing to watch piles of repeated ads, you know.
Oh my God. So the house, the Airbnb we're staying at, they have a Roku stick or something, but I brought a Chromecast. When we started doing all these moves and stuff like that, my mother-in-law, when she passed, I had gotten her a Chromecast that she was using, so I made sure that we acquired it, and it sat in the drawer for years. So I got it, and I got it all hooked up and set up, and it has been a lifesaver.
Ah, yes.
And it's really isn't that hard to use.
No.
It occasionally will, I will not be able to cast to it, and I have to kind of like fiddle with my phone, but the kids, have no problems getting stuff on there, and they're all mad at me because I won't let them have Hulu on their phones for like so many reasons. But they're like, "But we have to use your phone." I'm like, "Yeah, use my phone, but you're using your phone." That's it. Sucks for you. This seems to be a decidedly you problem, because I'm not seeing the issue at all. But I really do like it. I really do. It's quite nice. But the Hulu they have is the ad-supported one, of course, and it is just they start watching. My son's been trying to go through the original Dragon Ball Z cartoons. So racist, misogynistic, and just so many problems with it. But whatever. He's probably not going to turn into a serial killer, but the ads might turn him into one because it's like so many ads. All right, Eddy in Barcelona. First of all, ciao from Barcelona, dude. I wouldn't mind going to Barcelona. I have not been there. First up, Eddie's girlfriend has a name. Well, I would hope so. That would be very odd if she was just named Eddie's girlfriend. Hello, this is Eddie and Eddie's girlfriend. What's her name? Eddie's girlfriend. Well, anyways, her name is Mercedes, which is that is a name. Or actually, so funny thing, this is actually true. My grandmother has the same name, except she pronounced it Mercedes.
Really?
And yeah, that's that. So whenever I see that, I always have to think to myself how to say that. So, ciao, Mercedes. I almost said Mercedes. Mercedes. She was really pleased with our compliments about the render she made of Eddie's room when we were first describing his setup to us. If you guys remember, we were talking about it because it looked like real. It was weird. So anyways, she runs a design and consulting business helping people plan their home offices and renovations. So if anybody would like to check it out, she's running a promotion right now, and her website is gonna be in the description of this podcast, but I guess she's running a special, so it's FemHomes, FEM
Yep. And there's we'll have a link for the actual special, but if you just want to check out the general website, femhomes.com.
All right. Does FEM stand for something? It's not like only female homes.
I don't think so. Yeah.
I accidentally turned the volume up when you said that. Blew my ears off. So, you're still too high. Sorry. There we go. All right. So as for Eddie's setup, he took our advice and with a pair of Q Acoustics Concept 40 speakers plus an SVS PP1000 subwoofer. He says, thank God he got a subwoofer. And thankfully, no complaints from any neighbors yet. He also says he cannot sufficiently describe how happy he is with the speaker and subwoofer purchases. Well, if you can't describe it, maybe your girlfriend could do a diagram of it, because I'm pretty sure she can do anything she wants with the computer. She's magic.
Also, one reason his neighbors might not be complaining is we can definitely see that he's got the isolation feet on the bottom of that PP1000. That was a good call.
Oh, I'm not low enough to look at that yet. All right. Let me see how they've taken all his listening up several notches, and now he knows he will end up falling down the rabbit hole for a new receiver and full surround setup next year. They also arranged the room layout so that his home theater now faces one of the shorter walls, and it's open at the back instead of on the left side now. So he says, thanks again for all the tips and giving him an entertaining podcast to listen to every week. I don't see the feet on there, but I'm assuming that. Oh, there. Oh, those sound path feet on those.
Sound path feet. That's what that is. Okay, the round ones. Yeah.
I spent this whole time thinking that blue thing was a door.
Nope, just a wall.
What is that thing on there? It looks like a peephole. That's why I thought it was a door.
I think maybe it's a thermostat. Maybe.
I'm
not sure.
All right. Anyways, it's a very blue wall. Mm-hmm. It's a very blue portion of wall. It's very interesting. Maybe I should have hooked up with Mercedes to design my house.
Right.
The lady I'm working with right now, who I slowly want to watch strangle to death. I'm telling you, I like all the people I'm working with. I like the designer, I like the contractors and stuff like that. But I very much want to make them just suffer a little bit, just in some way. Not,
yes,
just a little, flame under the, the feet.
That is
just for not so that they're burnt, but just so that they realize that pain goes two ways. I very much want them all out of my house right now. Thank you very much. Fred wanted to provide an update on his house grounding situation. Fred actually watched the movie Up, and now he needs to get his house back on the ground.
I see.
That's a
great joke, Tom. Top notch.
Yeah, that one was off the cuff right
Top
there.
Top drawer.
Just felt.
I can tell you're prepared for this one, Tom.
I'm prepared for this podcast.
You focus grouped it, workshopped it.
That one killed with the 11 to 14-year-olds. It was killing, I'm telling you.
If they recognized it as a joke, I'm sure they did. Yeah.
Oh my God. He called his ISP, which is Spectrum, and was amazed and happy with the responsive service. Everybody else was amazed too, because I've never heard anybody say that. So it's so incident dependent. If you get the right person, all of a sudden everything's magically fixed, and if you get the wrong person, you go down the rabbit hole of never getting answered. So an engineer was scheduled within a couple of days, and he completely understood the situation, got everything sorted out with any pushback or hassle. His incoming cable connection was given a new junction box, now on the same side of his house as his electrical panel, and is properly grounded to the bonded terminal instead of an outdoor water tap, which is actually pretty common.
Oh,
If you
yes.
don't have something to ground to, you just ground it to one of the pipes, because the pipes are also supposed to be grounded.
But yeah, if you're seeing the images on
not always
YouTube
are.
showing the current situation, which looks nice and clean, and we can see
Yes,
that
it does.
the electrical panel and the cable inlet are now grounded together. And now I will put up the before image where, yeah, someone might look at that and go,
I gotta believe that box was closed in
Oh,
before this picture was
well,
taken.
I
But
don't know. I wouldn't put it beyond the person
yeah,
who did this grounding job to that outdoor faucet. Anyway, very happy that things are proper now.
yeah, I just got my electrical box redone because insurance required me
Yeah.
to do it, and that little gray thing on the wall with the
Hmm.
grounding wire, it's 100% the way they do it these
Yes. Yeah.
days.
Well, that's
Anyways,
by
for this,
code.
very thankful to AVRant listener Mario for the information he provided, and best of all, everything in Fred's theater is working perfectly, and he feels much better now. So that's
Good.
good.
Good. Good.
Great. Yeah, it looks much better.
Hmm.
It looks like, it won't spontaneously catch on fire for some reason. All right. Mark wanted to add a bit more to the mini split AC discussion. And actually, I wanted to add a little bit
Okay.
more to this too this week, so I'm glad this came up. He's in New Mexico, and as you may or may not be aware, aka it's real hot. And by real hot, you mean like stupid hot. I was in Scottsdale, Arizona in uh,
Hmm.
August or late July, and it was like 115 degrees outside, and people were biking to work still. They're like, yeah, it's dry heat though. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
oh my God. Like, how do you do this? Like, well, I just bring two extra change of clothes. I'm like, two? I'm like, yeah. One when I get to work, I change to my work clothes, and then after work, I change into different clothes to bike home.
Right.
Like, oh my God. All right. His house is 70 years old and doesn't have great thermal insulation. They went with a 4-ton Mitsubishi compressor and several fan units throughout his house. He is yet another very satisfied Mitsubishi customer, and even under his circumstances, his fan units pretty much never go above the low setting, and they are quiet and work very well. Furthermore, even the 4-ton compressor outside is quiet compared to regular AC compressors. But one thing I wanted to mention is that the larger you go with the fan units, the louder they get, even in their low settings. So our advice to potentially oversize the fan unit for your theater room isn't necessarily a good choice. For example, he has a 9,000 BTU fan unit for the 15 by 15 theater room and is whisper quiet. But then he has a 1500 BTU fan unit
15,000.
that 15,000, sorry, BTU fan unit for his open living room, and on low, it's roughly the same loudness as the smaller unit on medium. So in his experience, if keeping things super quiet is top priority, it might be better to install two smaller fan units rather than one bigger fan unit. That sounds super expensive. I will say that I got my haircut this week. My wife finally let us get our haircut. So, or maybe that was last week, but I went back. I can't remember anything. It was last week. I don't remember. Anyway, so I was there, and she had a split
Hmm.
mini split thing, and it was quite big for the
Hmm.
space, and it was on the low setting, and I didn't. I mean, once I saw it and I listened for it,
Sure.
I could hear it, but yes, it was very, very, very quiet. So my experience, I think it had a unit that was probably smaller than that was supposed to do an entire
Mm.
house, and it was just
Struggling.
very loud. Yes, very loud. So, I'm glad that we've gotten some more information about this. I think what it really is going to come down to is, the size of your room, like
Hmm.
what you're doing with it, where you put it in relation to where
Hmm.
you're sitting, and being very careful about uh, making sure that you're choosing something that can stay at a low setting and still cool your room, and how loud what the decibels are, that would normally come off that unit. You don't want to sit there and get something that's big enough to do the entire house and put it
Right.
in an 11 by 19-foot room. It's going to be loud because it's going to have a lot of power. It's just, think of a car idling. If you've got a big engine, it idles louder than a
Hmm.
normal car. So yeah, it's some good information here, and I'm glad that this is now coming out more, because
Yeah.
I definitely has me thinking about my home
Well, we
theater.
certainly haven't had a single person say, "Oh, my Mitsubishi Mini Split is loud." Not a single person has said that. Everyone so far has confirmed that theirs is quiet and works wonderfully. So that is good. The more evidence, I'm happy about that. And thank you, Mark, for that information. It's really good.
All right, CB was asking on Twitter about the necessary bandwidth for 8K at various frame rates, so that prompted Rob to forward him the slides from the HDMI Forum's presentation on the HDMI 2.1 specification, which includes a chart of all the various resolutions, frame rates, and bit depths. So we will provide the link for that for anybody else who is interested. So that will be in the show notes.
And anybody who is saying, where is it in this slide presentation? It is on page 44, so it's along towards the end. I'm showing the chart on YouTube if you want to pause it and see it that way. But yeah, we'll have the link for that presentation, and page 44 is where you will find it.
All right, Tom, not me, different guy. Tom is shopping for a projector. He's willing to consider as much as 10 grand. He's heavily leaning towards the JVC NX7, but Sony just announced their new models, and the VW715ES, thank you, Sony, is right at the $10,000 mark. So how would we compare these two, and which one do we think he should buy? Or is there some other model entirely that would get our vote? I mean, I read the question, but I didn't do any research on that.
So,
but it would take me all day to figure this answer out when I could just wait for you to do it.
We have not seen the VW715ES in person, so we can't be sure. But based on their early review of the 915, which was an update to the 885, and the 715 is an update to the 695, we wouldn't expect that the actual, Sony calls it SXRD, Sony Crystal Reflective Display, with an X for crystal, but that is their brand name for liquid crystal on silicon. I would not anticipate that the panels themselves are different between the two models. They make one type of panel and use it across the line. So the early reports on the 915 of the reviews are that the panel itself doesn't appear to have like significant improvements to native contrast of just the liquid crystal on silicon panel. Now, in the 915, they've done things in terms of how much they can step the control of, in that case, the laser light engine, and they have something somewhat similar with the lamp-based light engine of the 715, and then there's a dynamic iris that also works in there. But overall, the reports are not that these new updates suddenly have drastically better inherent panel contrast or something like that. Black levels seem to be slightly improved, but that's mostly coming from a tweaking of the dynamic iris and the light engine settings. So it's sort of the same question that you had before JVC had the frame-by-frame HDR tone mapping. You could compare the Sonys and the JVCs, and now both the Sonys and the JVCs have frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping, so we're kind of equal footing there again, and we're back to sort of the inherent differences in the panel technology and which look you prefer, because there is sort of just an inherent difference to the way that they look. Now, people who are really, really big fans of all the shadow detail definitely being visible, like essentially no black crush, but the absolute black level maybe not being like the purest black. It's a little bit gray, and then the intra-scene contrast, as in one little white dot right next to a black pixel, being not quite as high, but all the detail is there. Okay, that basically describes what Sony does. And some people think of that as a more cinematic experience. It looks a bit more like a film projector used to look. Whereas the JVC, the panels inherently have just a higher intra-scene contrast and inherently deeper black levels, but they tend to have a little bit of black crush, and the whole image just looks more contrasty. It looks more like a gigantic flat panel. Right? So if you're the type of person who says, I never totally loved the way film looked and I preferred the way my flat panel looks, then you'll probably want the JVC. If you're the polar opposite and said, I always preferred the way film looked versus my flat panel, then you'll want the Sony. And I think that's enough to let you decide, because MSRP, there's $1,000 price difference between these two models. You know, on the street price, it's about $2,000 because the NX7 is a little cheaper than MSRP now. But yeah, that's really what it comes down to, because they can both do frame-by-frame tone mapping now.
Okay. Exciting.
Yeah.
Terry Receivers versus separates. Receivers. Next question. I'm sorry, guys. I know you. I know there's people out there that really want me to just love separates, and I mean, honestly, I do. I love separates. I think they're great. I'm not, just never ever gonna buy them or suggest that you buy them. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you feel that way. Terry wants to make it clear that he thinks that what we've said on the subject makes the most sense, but as we know, the topic keeps coming up. Thanks, Terry. We know because you brought it up. And there are some common claims about the benefits of superiority of a dedicated multi-channel Pro plus separate amps versus a receiver handling everything on its own. Yes. It's that I like spending money and it makes me feel good and I need to justify it. And one recent YouTube, actually, you know what? I like to feel superior over other people, so I spend money so that I can feel superior. And you telling me that I wasted my money makes me feel less superior, and therefore you're wrong. That's literally what's going through the head of every person who owns a separate. That's not true, but it is the vast majority of them. In one recent YouTube video, a popular home theater YouTuber talks about the better separation of channels he heard. No, he didn't. The better bass. No, he didn't. The clearer dialogue? No, he didn't. And the overall improved listening experience? That might be true. He was comparing a Marantz AV7705 connected to a monolith amp versus a Marantz SR8012 flagship receiver, and perhaps most confusingly, he said he tried using the monolith amp with the receiver, but it wasn't until he switched to the dedicated pre-pro that he really noticed a difference. There it is. there's that right there tells you everything you need to know about this review. In all cases, he was using large clip speakers. It's all pause to digest how much power he would clip speakers actually require.
He did note himself
to do anything.
That with his clip speakers, he does not require very many watts. He noted that.
That's good. Clip speakers in a medium to large size room with power sound audio subs. So Terry thinks he likely just fell prey to the psychological side of things, anticipating a difference, and then, sure enough, hearing it. Or perhaps it has a little something to do with being sent products to review as opposed to actually purchasing them with his own money. Actually, getting sent products to review. From a reviewer, I will tell you, there is more peer pressure to find something good to say about a thing than there is a feeling that this is this big expensive thing that I didn't have to pay for, and therefore I feel so fortunate that I should say good things about it. The latter is not the case. You don't ever feel that way. If anything, you value it less because you don't have to pay for it. You value it when you paid for it with your own money. Psychologically, you're more likely to find reasons to like it, because if not, then you have to admit that you wasted your money. If somebody gave it to you, you don't have to feel that way. Just like, I don't know, it's a piece of crap, somebody gave it to me, so I'm using it. And then there's no ego invested in there. But Terry wants to know the objective side of things. Is it possible in any way for a pre-pro to produce audibly different results versus the receiver if both of them actually use the same external amp to power the speakers? There's a common refrain that there is better separation and or more accurate steering of surround and overhead effects. Is there really any way for a pre-pro could do that? And what do we think accounts for the differences that many people describe when they switch from a receiver to separates? I already told you what that was. But so could there be audible, because this is what you asked, right? Audible differences, not measurable differences. Could there be measurable differences between a separates and a pre-pro and a receiver that's being used as a pre-pro? And the answer is probably yes.
In fact, Gene over at Audioholics has definitely shown instances where going with the pre-outs, in the case XLR pre-outs from a dedicated pre-pro versus the RCA pre-outs from even a high-end AV receiver. Now, even there was a big caveat in Gene's measurements over at Audioholics, which was that it was only above 1.6 volts. That below 1.6 volts, there was essentially no difference even measurably, but above 1.6 volts, there was less noise and distortion objectively, measurably, out of the XLR pre-outs of the dedicated pre-pro. So that was a factual measurement-based difference that did exist. Is it theoretically possible that that could result in an audible difference? Well, there are some amplifiers out there that require more than 1.6 volts to reach their full rated power, but you're going to be way up at the top of the output range, so you would have to be using pretty inefficient speakers or sitting very far away from your speakers to even get to the point where you need to put the signal that high and be drawing that many watts. And then, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of caveats to it, but
so
it can be measured.
It can't. So that's not what he asked, though. He asked for audible.
Yeah. And in particular, that explains the common refrains that we hear.
Right. So audible, when we if you're going to tell me that there was a audible difference between separates versus a receiver and an amplifier, the only thing that I could think I would believe would be, other than absolute, like, something's wrong with the receiver, something's broken someplace in the signal chain, is noise floor.
Okay.
That's about the only thing I could suspect, that if you got an older receiver with noisy pre-outs and efficient speakers with really clean amp, yes, maybe noise floor would be the one thing. The steering is, first of all, in most of the cases, like especially in this one, you're comparing essentially the same product, but one has amps in it and one has the amps outside of it.
Well, I even have more to say on that in this particular instance, since we actually know the models he was using.
Right, the models he was using. So, if you're actually doing the apples to apples comparison, like you take the Marantz, the pre-pro, and the receiver that is essentially the pre-pro but with amps in it and usually a couple other things, it's the steering and stuff like that. That's all. I mean, what do you think the amps have to do with any of that? I mean,
or
the
connection between
the amps, right? None of that has anything to do with it.
That would be literally
it's all in the electronic side.
Decoding the signal differently somehow,
right?
And they are definitely
blaming
not
your tires for your radio not working correctly. You're like, what the tires have to do with anything?
They are definitely not using different decoders inside of the pre-pro versus the AV receiver. No, I definitely. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Finish. Yeah.
No, it's like, I'm just gonna say, my last thing is, yes. So really, all the other stuff that you hear, dialogue, intelligibility, all this other stuff, it's all either psychological or has to do with a lot of other things that could be real but are in no way attributable to the fact that it is a pre-pro.
Right.
Or it's separate. It has to do with, maybe the calibration was different. Maybe it's newer. Maybe they have ran Audyssey differently. Maybe they changed their seating. Maybe they, maybe the settings are different. Maybe it's just turned up louder.
Because I do not believe for a second that they invested in a very precise SPL meter to ensure that they didn't have even a 1.5 decibel difference. Can be absolutely enough for you to subjectively go, oh, that sounds clearer. Because that is objectively an audible difference. So without being so drastic, they go, oh, well, that was clearly louder that time. So but no, in this case, I had to laugh because the AV7705 is based internally on the exact same platform as the SR60 13, I think it was, when this one came out. Which is the manufactured in China platform, which the AV7705 is. And he was comparing it at the time to the Marantz SR8012, which is one of the made in Japan, objectively uses some different components, more expensive, higher-end components. So, in fact, the internal components in this instance of the receiver were like higher quality than of the pre-pro that he was using. And more than that, I really had to laugh because the AV8805, which is the would be akin to the 8012 receiver, the made in Japan version. There are the people out there who go, oh, well, once you step up from the 8805 to an Anthem or, a Trinov or an Arcam or whatever other more expensive brand, well, then you really can hear the difference between a mass market company like Marantz and a dedicated pre-pro company. I mean, that's where you can really hear the differences. So, I mean, every time you know that it's BS, because no matter what it is, they will just say, well, here's what I know I'm expected to say, so that's what I'm going. Because if I don't say this, all the people who make these claims about the superiority go, well, you can't listen to this guy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He didn't think the Pre-Pro sounded better than the AV receiver.
I don't know how many times people have said that about my
Right.
reviews, where I'm like, there was no difference between these things. And they're like, well, if you can't hear the difference, then what are you doing being a reviewer? I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm not full of it, I guess, is what I'm thinking.
But I mean,
Telling the truth instead of the lies you're used
I
to.
will completely admit that when I am talking about a product that was sent to me particularly by people that I like, I like them in real life. They sent me a product to talk about, or I'm interviewing them. Like, yeah, I pull my punches. I'll admit it. I try to be positive. I try to have a good time and keep the mood light and all those things, because I like the person and I want to talk in a positive manner about the product that they're promoting, and that's why they're happy to talk to me or send me the product to talk about, because they're looking to get it marketed as a positive thing. I don't really blame someone with a YouTube channel for talking positively about the products that they're sent, because you know what? If you don't, you end up like Vincent Teo, who has to buy his own TVs to review now because Samsung and LG are like, yeah, we don't like that you criticize our televisions, even though you do the best reviews anybody does. So, that's what ends up happening. So that's what it is. The differences described, you're expected to say them, and yeah, no, it's just not there. But you can pretty much trust the measurements that like Audioholics does.
Right. So what home theater recliners do we... Is this the same
Yeah.
dude? So let's go back to the top. I don't remember his name. Terry. Terry says, what home theater recliners do we recommend? He wants some that offer adjustable headrest and very good lumbar support. Again, I'm going to reiterate that I have come full circle on this whole home theater seating thing. I don't like the arms in between, like the being in a chair that's by yourself. I used to like that, and I don't anymore. I would prefer having a sectional that you build to so that everything reclines, and you could have one big massive reclining seat all the way across,
you can
rather than having
do that with the ones I'm going to mention by just getting armless ones to put in the middle.
Yes, that is true. The problem is that there's still, each seat is meant, and it's not a problem. I said a problem, but I'm saying my issue is I like to have the larger chairs that can, like, 1.5 people can sit on. So it gives me more just kind of room to relax at an angle or whatever, and then whatever. But yes, in most home theater seating like places, it's basically a sectional. You can pick each one that you want, and it can have no arms or with arms, or because the first home theater seating I purchased, we basically made a love seat in the center and two individual seats on the side with a slight angle to those seats on the side, so that I don't know, it looked kind of weird, but it was actually pretty functional. So that I have no problems with that. That being said, I think there's a lot more options once you start looking at true sectionals versus like the home theater seating. But this stuff that Rob's about to recommend is pretty inexpensive, so it's hard to really look past that price.
And that's why I like them. And it's our friends over at HT Market did an interview with the owner of HT Market, Alan Hutchinson. So I appreciate the value that they're offering, that they've got lots of features. It's nice leather on all these seats, and the prices are reasonable for all the features that you get. So for the things that you described, their flagship, which is called the Clark, they've got different names for all of their seats, but this one, the Clark, has power everything. It's power recline, it's got lights in the cup holders, lights underneath the seats, power headrest, and power lumbar as well. It's got an inflatable lumbar that you can inflate or deflate to give yourself more or less lumbar. It also has a memory, like your car seat, the seat in your car, so you can go back to a set position and then press two buttons to return back to fully de-reclined. So those are $1,100 per seat for the flagship, but that is the most expensive model that they offer. It is the only one that has the inflatable lumbar. But they do have other models that have more or less lumbar support just inherently. And they know their seats top to bottom, and they have lots of experience with what works for people of different heights and different weights and different body shapes and all that. So they're well worth giving them a call, talking it over about the size and comfort and everything that you're looking for, and they will point you to a really good model. $1,100 per seat is the maximum you will pay there. So everything is less than that.
Matt. First up, Matt just wanted to provide an update that a new HDMI cable sorted out the ARC audio return channel issue he was having with the Sony X900F TV. He's also still hoping to one day find a single streaming device that can provide the highest audio and video formats for all of the services he uses. Fingers crossed for Google's new Android TV streaming dongle, but we'll have to see.
I mean, maybe the Roku Ultra. Hardware-wise, it can do
it. Honestly, we keep talking about like I'm looking for the box that does it. Almost all the boxes can do it. It's not the box.
The hardware is capable.
It's
the individual apps for whatever reason.
It's explain to me why the Xbox One can't do audio right. What possible reason could there be hardware wise? What better Xbox do I need to buy?
I mean, I will have to laugh if Google's own Android TV dongle, which they are creating to replace the Chromecast devices, if that one doesn't do YouTube at the highest quality with HDR, I will laugh at that. Because, I mean, none of the other Android TV separate boxes do, even the NVIDIA Shield, which hardware-wise is completely capable, but still doesn't do HDR on YouTube.
All right, so Matt needs some surge protection. It doesn't have to be a battery backup, but he wouldn't be opposed to it either. He knows we like APC, but which models? There are so many on their website. He'd like battery options, surge-only options, and any other options that we think he should consider. He needs one for his home theater gear and another for his network gear in a different room. So Rob's going to suggest battery backup for pretty much all of that.
I mean, I like having it. I never have battery backup and go, oh, I wish I didn't. So.
Right. And honestly, I have battery backup, but I only use it for the projector, pretty much. And there's just nothing else I can really do because I stream everything, so I need a separate battery backup, which I might be getting for the router, which is now going to be moved into the house. So I put the router and the modem in the house, and everything will be good. But I have the H series of APC. That's no battery backup, surge only, but has pretty much all the options you need. And they have like the H10, the H15, and you have to pick which size you want based on usually price. But also, if you are going to plug in some high current things into it, you need to know which one to buy. But both of those I can highly recommend.
Yeah, for the H series, which looks like it also is on its way out from APC's lineup, as the J series and S series have been discontinued. The H series had the same looks. They're discounting it on their own website. The H10 down to $205 now, which is the lowest it's ever been. So looks like that's on its way out as well. But in addition to surge protection, that one has independent filtering banks for RFI and EMI, and voltage regulation. So it also has the most outlets of pretty much anything APC sells, with 12 outlets, 2 of which are high current outlets that allow through the full 15 amps. The other one's letting through 12. So yeah, that is one option without battery backup that would look good in an equipment rack, because it basically looks like a regular piece of home theater equipment in terms of form factor. Now, going back down to like the least expensive thing I would recommend in APC's lineup, their surge protector, that is the P8V. You can find it for $65. It is just surge and some basic filtering of RFI and EMI. That's all it is, but a nice, dependable unit that actually does allow through the full 15 amps. So that can be a really nice unit if all you need is some very good surge protection. Going up a rung from that, you could get some battery backup with one of their regular back UPS units. I like the BE850. It goes for $110. That provides you with 6 battery protected outlets and 3 surge only outlets. All of them are limited to 12 amps, but this is an excellent choice for your network gear. because I love having some battery backup for my router and any network attached storage or something like that. Wonderful to have some battery backup for this stuff, and $110 doesn't break the bank, and it's a fairly compact form factor as far as battery units go. So I already mentioned the H10 that you might use for your home theater equipment, but these days, if you want battery backup for your home theater, I'm going with their Gaming Performance series, which is part of their back UPS Pro lineup. So they've got 3 models in there, which are the BR1000MS, the BR1350MS, and the BR1500MS. As the numbers go up, you get longer and longer battery life and the ability to power more wattage off of the battery. So if you're talking about like a 60-watt load, which is your typical DVR, the 1000 will be able to run that for about an hour. The 1350 will be able to run that for an hour and 23 minutes, and the 1500 can run it for 2 hours just on the battery. So that gives you an idea there. Prices are $150, $180, and $240 going up. So yeah, you got 10 outlets on those, 6 of them battery backup, 4 of them surge only. So some pair of those should get the job done for you for your home theater gear and network stuff.
Yeah, so he needs to run some network cables under his house in his crawl space. What should he use? Outdoor rated Ethernet. I mean, that's pretty much all it is, right?
That's the easiest.
You can terminate that stuff yourself if you really want to.
Yeah, cables.com is a good place to go for that stuff. They're Cat 6 cables. You might as well go Cat 6 these days. They have weather-resistant, direct burial rated Ethernet Cat 6 cables, and it's like $40 for like a 40-foot run. It's basically $1 a foot, more or less, as far as the prices go. So yeah, that would get the job done. I do like Blue Jeans cable because they individually test every single Ethernet cable that they sell, but they are not outdoor rated. You'd have to run them inside of a metal conduit to protect them to really do it right. So the direct burial and weather resistant from cables.com is easier.
All right. Lior, as we've explained how you use the Audyssey Editor app. The changes you make only apply to the Audyssey reference setting, but Audyssey flat setting is still there and you can still select it. So what is happening in the receiver when you switch back and forth? Prior to the 2020 models, you could only store one set of Audyssey measurement data, correct? So how is the receiver applying 2 completely different target curves, one that is its own flat and the other you manually created in the app as reference? So how is it doing that? I mean, it's just applying different curves. I mean, one's one and one's the other. It's just switching.
Well, I think the easiest way to think of this is that inside the AV receiver, it is like, let's go before the 2020 models where you could only do Audyssey once.
Right.
What it's doing is storing one set of measurement data. Right? It played the little chirps and it played the test tones, and that is your measurement data, and it stores that. And then it can say, okay, now I have 2 different target curves where I want to apply the offsets necessary across the frequencies and the time domain to make the measured data as close to the target curve as I can. So it's one set of measurement data that's memorized inside of the AV receiver, and then 2 different target curves, so 2 different sets of calculated offsets that are applied to the signal to try and make the measured signal as close to the target, whichever one you choose. So when you have the Audyssey Editor app, it's simply replacing the default reference target curve with whatever target curve you created manually in the Audyssey Editor app. But the original measured data is still the same. It's still stored inside of the AV receiver as the one set of measured data. Now, in the case of the new 2020 models, you can have 2 sets of measured data and switch between those. So you could actually have 4 different target curves, 2 target curves applied to each of 2 sets of measured data. So, if you think of it in terms of measured data stored versus the offsets applied to that data to bring it towards a target curve.
So he says, as an aside, a member over on AVS Forum was part of a group that created a PC program that lets you load the Audyssey file off your phone from the Audyssey Editor app, making precise changes on your PC, and then create a new Audyssey file that you load onto your phone, and then use the Audyssey Editor app to load onto your AV receiver. So there's like 32 pages, 600 comments on this thread, and I obviously did not read them all. What he was really going for was, it's not like you can it's not like you can change a lot of the parameters of Audyssey, the Q of the different EQs. You can't change a lot of stuff. It's really more just to make it a little bit easier to interface with all the settings that you can change. And
Right.
you can do all these things on the Audyssey Editor app. They're just hidden behind menus.
Sure. And in the
So,
case of adjusting the target curve, you're either using your finger on your phone or tablet,
right,
or as I'm pretty sure it was Daz who mentioned it on Twitter, there definitely are programs that allow you to use a mouse on your, say, iPad or
right.
your Android tablet. There definitely are ways to use a mouse to do that instead of your finger. But this is saying, okay, you can bring it over to a PC and do things there instead if you want to, using this
Right.
separate
This
program.
is not going to give you any deeper control than you
Right.
have
Right.
that with the editor app. It's just going to give you more precise control over very specific things, and also risk corrupting your files and ruining everything.
Yeah, this is
So,
not an
mega,
official supported program or
yeah.
anything like that. Yeah.
So, give it a try if you're really into that sort of thing.
Sure.
Matt, but honestly, if you're not wanting to change the curve really, really
Mm.
precisely, I don't see any reason to download this thing. You just have to deal with menus.
I mean, a lot of phones and tablets can use a stylus these days. That
Right.
might be a really nice way to do it, honestly.
Matt. So Matt is back from 2 weeks ago with some pictures and further description of his basement, in which one half will be his theater with a 120-inch screen, and the other half will be a bar that can be opened onto a walkout. Last time he asked about the in-wall speaker options, $200 max, and the TCL TVs for the bar. I vaguely remember this. So from his pictures, the total space is separated into two halves, but the stairs coming down in the middle, with a door for the stairs at the bottom. The stack for the stairs is open on both ends, so the theater area and the bar area are still open to each other. Matt plans to put his projection screen on the staircase stack, and he'll have a storage area behind the theater's back wall. The theater area will end up being 13 feet from front to back, 27 feet wide, and 9 feet high. This is what his wife agreed to, and she also wants nothing but in-wall speakers. So she has vetoed on-walls and definitely no regular speakers. So this is the layout. No going back now. You just use blue tape to mark off some different size screen options here. Okay, I'm looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there's tape. You can kind of sort of see it. So one of the screen sizes has melted into the floor. So
That's
that
right.
happens. That will happen.
That's what happens when tape falls off of studs.
So the back wall framed with storage area behind it. Uh, oh, right, because it's wider than this long.
Correct.
That's what's throwing me
Yeah.
off here. Got it. Got it. Got it. Got it. Got it. Got it.
Mm-hmm.
So now that we better understand the plan, which in-wall speakers stick with HSU uh, HIW1s that Rob suggested before? Keep in mind he's in a rural area, so he can't easily visit any shops besides the one that only sells Paradigm for in-walls. He's going with two SVS subs and is pre-wired for 6 different locations to give himself options. I don't even know that you need 6 different locations. I think I can tell you exactly where to put those subs, but
It
um,
doesn't hurt. When you're pre-wiring before the
doesn't
walls
hurt.
go up, it doesn't hurt. So I'm fine with that.
So speaker options
Mm-hmm.
here, so I know you want only in
Yep.
walls, which is
Yep.
fine. Everything's open, so you can kind of decide where you're going to
Mm-hmm.
want them as far as that. But your room is much wider than it is deep,
Yeah.
which means the main brunt of the sound comes from the front of the room, which means you don't need extremely efficient speakers because since the room is only 13 feet deep, I mean, the farthest away you can sit from these things is like 12 and a half feet.
Right.
If you
But
consider there's at least a half a foot between you and the back of
at
the
the same
wall.
time, the whole space is open. And
Right.
if his surround speakers actually end up going on his side walls, then they're a fair distance away from him. So,
And that's what I was going to say. So your sidewall distance is where you're going to run into
mm,
many more issues. Trying to get your side surrounds to keep up with your fronts. So while an argument could be made that you can use whatever speakers you want in here because you're sitting so close to the front wall, you may want to continue to take into account the fact that you're going to need something a little bit more on the efficient side just so that those side surrounds aren't going to become lost in the
Mhm.
in this massive distance here. So Rob's initial suggestion there is very good. You still can look at RBH as far as I'm
Oh,
concerned.
sure.
They're not going to be the most efficient. They don't focus on efficiency in their designs, but they are rarely, especially at the price points you're looking at, hard to drive. They're going to be easy to drive and reasonably efficient. So that would be the only other thing that I would think I would point you
But
towards.
I'm just thinking that
Uh,
it might be difficult for him to obtain RBH where he lives.
that is
They're not
true.
always
How do you feel? How do you feel about becoming a dealer?
right. Wow,
You get dealer
that's an
prices.
out of the way dealer. But I mean,
Hey, those people out there need dealers
that's
too.
right.
Okay, now this is going to start sounding weird if we don't specify dealers for speakers, not dealers of other things.
But I personally, I'm still very much in favor of going with the HSUs. You can order them online. They're very affordable for the price point you wanted to get. If your sidewall speakers end up quite far away from you, they won't have a problem with that because they're nice and efficient. They can contend with the open space that you're dealing with at the front of the room. So I'm still very much in favor of the HSU HIW1 in walls.
All right. So he's thinking he'd go with a Seymour AV Center Stage XD or Ultrafine for the acoustically transparent screen, along with the Epson 5050UB. He plans to actually have the projector in the storage area and have it shine through an opening in the back wall. What are our thoughts? So you're now going to have a gap?
Well,
Is that?
I'm not sure if he's going to have like an actual air opening into the storage area or just a window. Um,
I am. I'll be honest with you. I'm not super in favor of this for a lot of
but
reasons.
he
The
might actually need to because of throw distance. He's only
throw
got
distance,
13
right?
feet to that wall.
So this is my issue here. My issue is that a storage area almost universally, unless you're some sort of weird clean freak, is not the cleanest room in your house, right? You drop food on the floor in there, you don't want to eat it, and you're now going to subject your projector, which is going to be sucking in a bunch of air, putting it through a fan, and potentially spraying, getting dust within it and on its screen, which has happened to many people before.
And
Um,
you do have to
if you're
remember
going
that most of the home theater projectors, at least the exhaust is on the front, if not intake and exhaust on the front of the projector. So
right,
it's not always the easiest thing to have that close up to a wall, unless he was just planning to build a cubby into the back wall. That could potentially work with the front
if
open.
that's what you're planning on doing, then I think this is
Okay.
fine. I think this is fine because I'm thinking that if you're going to just put a hole in the wall, then
Mm,
you're now opening it to everything else. And if you're not going to do that, if you're going to try to get some sort of plexiglass, then you have to deal with all of that
hmm
nonsense, which can be problematic. You now got a window you got to clean all the time to make sure that you're not you're not getting your image distorted in any way. And then your projector is in a dusty room, being subjected to perhaps even temperatures that are significantly higher than the room right on the other
hmm
side of the wall. If you want to really, and then you might, like Rob said, you might have to do it this way because of throw distance. If you're going to do that, basically have it still in your room by building a completely enclosed cubby out into the storage area, and don't have it, you know,
Yeah, actually in
uh,
the storage area,
in that
shining
in the storage
through the
area.
wall.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think of the screen choices there? Because he is going to need acoustically
Well,
transparent for his front
you
wall blend.
acoustically transparent. I mean, you're going to be sitting. I mean, we're not going to want you on the back wall, and it's a 120-inch screen, so 9, 10 feet away, something like that. Um, I mean, I don't see any reason why you have to spend all the money for Seymour AV. It's really good. There's no doubt about it. But you know, I don't really know why you can't go with the other option that we always go with, which is I
So
can't
I
remember
mean,
what it is.
Tom and I are going to disagree here because Tom will always just go for a regular white screen. So it would probably be in Tom's case if you're going lower price, Elite screens, Acoustic Pro UHD.
Yeah.
Definitely, if you're going Elite screens and Acoustic Pro, get the UHD version, not the 1080 version, which is not as good, and the price difference is not much. So Acoustic Pro UHD from Elite could be a less expensive white. I am going to go ahead and say this room is never going to be completely dark. You've got the bar.
What are you talking
You've got the
about,
bar
man?
on the other side of this wall, and I mean,
But there's like a small little opening. And the screen's on the wall. I mean, the light has to come into this space,
uh,
bounce off the back wall, and then come back in. Come back to the screen to start washing it
I
out.
am okay.
Just paint the walls dark, and then you won't have to worry about that. Oh my God, you're
I'm
not
okay with
seriously going to
saying
suggest
ambient
this?
light rejecting. Now, I'm not talking ultra short throw. I'm not talking the sawtooth ceiling light rejecting. I'm talking standard ambient light rejecting. I'm going to suggest Elite Screens here. They have in their Aeon series the Cinegray 3D material that I think is pretty darn reasonable, and the 120-inch size for Cinegray 3D in an acoustically transparent format, which means it's actually perforated, so that you can have the little holes in the screen for the sound to come through. So it's $1,250 for the Cinegray 3D ambient light rejecting with perforations to make it acoustically transparent, 120-inch size.
I'm clicking on mine to see how much mine is.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the same one. Cinegray 3D.
It would be.
Oh.
Yeah. No, you're looking for Acoustic Pro UHD over at Elite Screens. I'm not sure on the price on that. It's less.
I will. Well, I just think Rob's lost his mind here. But
Tom does not like ambient light rejecting screens. Full stop.
I don't. Full stop. I don't like them unless that. I mean, though I have recommended them before in certain applications. I think that if your wife can be convinced to paint the walls gray or a darker color, then you won't get as much light reflection. You're gonna get like bleeding of the light around the corner. Just dimmer, my friend. Buy some. Turn the bar. It's not supposed to be, bright like a basketball court. Just turn it down in there. That's all I'm saying.
All right.
Anyway, he's not super worried about soundproofing. He won't be doing sound clips and hat channels or double drywall or any of that nonsense. He'd like to reduce the noise levels going upstairs beyond just standard construction. He plans to insulate the walls. Should he pay more to get Roxel safe and sound, or is the regular pink stuff okay? If you're worried about it going upstairs, how about insulating the ceiling?
Well, I think he's considering that. Just that everything will be insulated.
I would insulate it all. Yep. Yes, I would insulate
including
it all.
The ceiling.
Yeah, and then I would worry. I mean, if you find yourself in the situation where you think that there's still a lot of sound bleeding upstairs, make sure you have a solid core door at the bottom of those stairs. I would also look at all the outlets and any sort of openings in your walls, and make sure that those have foam insulation or whatever that stuff is, that caulk or whatever they put in there. And then your lighting that you install, make sure that that's, if it's possible to have it enclosed or some sort of back can on it to keep that from being a source of transmission.
Yeah, flanking paths are really your biggest thing here. That's any type of opening. You just got to make sure that the whole perimeter of that opening is nicely well sealed so that air can't.
But I would not
openings.
spend more for the extra installation. I just get
absolutely on that stuff. One for that question, just the pink stuff. That's all you need. They're acoustically speaking, even though there are insulations that are marketed as soundproofing insulation, they are no different from any other insulation. Any insulation will do.
So anything more he ought to do in the way of soundproofing, particularly the ceiling?
Now here, I've got a suggestion, because you're going to have to do something on this ceiling just for leveling, right? You don't typically put the drywall directly against the floor joists because they're never level. So you're almost certainly going to have some kind of furring strips at the very least. Typically, you just put up furring with shims to make sure that what you're attaching your ceiling drywall to is actually level up there. Well, this does add some to the cost, but it is worth it in that it will decouple the drywall from the floor joists, which is a big deal when you're trying to get some soundproofing for not going crazy on the price. So ISO Store has the cheapest way to do this with their Hush Frame which is just a wood and silicone based product where you attach the hush frame to the floor joist and then your furring strip to the hush frame. And it is a two-piece wood solution joined together by rubberized silicone, acting as a damper, acting as a spring. So since you were going to have to do something to level the ceiling anyway, attach the furring strips to hush frame blocks instead. That is what I would highly recommend there.
All right, for the 3 TVs in the bar, we convinced him to avoid the TCL 4 series, which is exactly the sort of advice he was hoping for. What about the 5 series versus the 6 series? Again, for sports and casual viewing, would we strongly argue to pay more to get the 6 series? I don't remember what the difference is between those two
Well,
series.
I mean, basically, it's edge lit versus full array local dimming. The 5 series is a good edge lit TV.
Right. I think we discussed this last time, right?
Yeah.
So the 4 is a bad edge
Yeah.
lit, the 5 is a decent edge lit, and the 6 says edge lit sucks and goes with
full array local dimming. I mean, there is an appreciable, visible difference between the 5 series and the 6 series. It's just a matter of how much do you want to spend. He was trying to spend as little as possible. And I was like, when that's the case, I don't think the 4 series is good enough full stop, but I can be okay with the 5 series. So if you just want to spend the least amount possible, then I'm okay with that. But the 6 series is appreciably better. I mean, if you are going to have any HDR content, it's a world of difference when it comes to HDR between the 5 series and the 6 series. But he was like, it's casual viewing, it's sports. A lot of that probably isn't going to be in HDR for years to come. So maybe you don't care about HDR and you just want to keep the prices low. I mean, he was going to have 3 TVs in the bar area. I'm like, is one of them sort of like the primary TV, the one that'll get watched the most? Maybe you make that one a 6 series and the other 2 secondary TVs 5 series. I could back a plan like that.
Sure. Ken. So Ken shared a couple of photos of the progress he's making in his theater. We convinced him to make a symmetrical soffits on both sides of his ceiling, then use them to mount the Soundware 4.5 speakers for Atmos, which he thankfully purchased before they disappeared from accessories for less. He also got 9 Ascend HTM 200 SEs to perfectly match and mount all around the room, 2 pairs of side surrounds for his 2 rows of seats, and he bought a Denon X4300H Receiver. So drywall's going in.
Mm-hmm.
I feel your pain, my friend.
Yeah.
That's a lot of fun. So he needs a 2-channel amp to expand to the full 11-channel setup, and since the Denon can power 9 on its own. We mentioned the AudioSource Amp 100, but they are back-ordered or sold out. So should he get the D-Class version from AudioSource instead, or something else? What is this? So if there's something else, if it's cheaper, I would definitely go with that. If they're about the same price, I would choose not D-Class over D-Class. So
right.
I like mine. Mine is the AudioSource Amp 1000.
I thought yours was the Dayton, but it's the one they don't sell anymore, which was Dayton.
Yeah, it's the Dayton Audio.
Yeah, Dayton used to have
100.
a Class AB, which was the APA 100. But they've discontinued that. They don't sell that Class AB model anymore. So
you should get that. That's what I would.
The one that you can't get.
That's the one.
I mean, here's the thing. This actually basically bleeds into his next question, but the speakers that you're most likely to be powering with this inexpensive 2-channel amp are not going to be your most critical speakers. And therefore, I'm pretty darn fine with powering them with a Class D amp. I would, in this instance, if you're going to end up going with a Class D amp anyway, just go for the one that's a little bit less expensive, but pretty much the exact same specs as the AudioSource AD1002, which is their Class D version, which is Dayton, which is their APA 102, which is the Class D version that Dayton sells. It's $130 versus $160 for the AudioSource Class D. So why not save the $30 for essentially the same thing and get the Dayton APA 102? And honestly, I think it's totally fine for what your purposes will be.
I still think you should get the one that I have.
Search far and wide and pay more for a discontinued amplifier.
Mine's better. One of us. Okay, which pair of speakers should you power with the external amp? He was thinking the surround backs. I don't think you have an option.
You don't get that option.
I looked at I tried to look at the 3700. I told you I prepped for this podcast. I downloaded the manual and everything. I felt so proud of myself. And then I remembered how much I hated these manuals. I went, oh my God. But yeah, the amp assign in there is fairly opaque as far as what actually you can and can't do. But it very much looks like you're going to have an option of one of two pairs of speakers
That's right.
to power with this thing, and it's not going to be the surround backs. I don't think it were ever an
No,
option on there.
you can choose. So what you're assigning in the Denon is you have 9 amps built in. All of the pre-outs are always active, so you could power any of the speaker channels externally if you wanted to, but 2 of your speakers must be powered externally in an 11-channel configuration.
Right.
And so you are selecting which of the 2 channels are mandatory that they have to be powered externally. And you can either choose those to be your front, left, right main speakers, which I wouldn't opt to use the Class D amplifier for those, or your rearmost overhead speakers, whatever they might be labeled. So that might be rear heights or top rears or possibly top middles, but whatever the rearmost overhead speaker pair is, that's your other option. So those are the ones, your rear heights. The power those with the Class D, the Soundware 4.5 Bostons, no problem powering those with the 60 watts per channel Class D amplifier.
Yeah. Gary took some of our previous advice and went with a 120-inch screen for a Sony VW715ES projector. He's very happy with the results.
Hey.
You're welcome. So he asked, the Xbox Series X will arrive soon. He'd like a projector that can take advantage of it. He knows there aren't any projectors that can do every trick in the book as far as all the variable refresh rates and 120 hertz stuff, but he'd be happy to have a 4K 60 with HDR.
Mm-hmm.
He was originally thinking of upgrading to the Epson 5040, but he's finding mixed information online as to whether or not it would be a suitable choice. So what's the deal? And if the 5040 is a no-go, what should he get instead? Well, the 5040 is not good enough, then you go with the 5050, because I'm pretty sure that should be fine.
And that is so the 5040 UB had HDMI ports that are limited to 10.2 gigabits per second. That means that they can do 4K 30 with HDR, but not 4K 60 with HDR. Okay. Whereas the newer 5050 UB has full 18 gigabit per second HDMI inputs, and it can do 4K 60 with HDR. So between the 5040 UB and the 5050 UB for something like an Xbox Series X, you would definitely want to choose the 5050 UB. Now, the 5050 UB right now is selling for $2,800 all over the place. Now, it's fantastic. At that price, there's really nothing better. It's got excellent black levels. It's got the full DCI P3 color if you want it, because it actually has a color filter it can put in the light path to give you the wider color. Like I say, 4K 60 support, decent latency for gaming, about 20 milliseconds. So, so not the lowest ever, but not bad. Definitely not bad. And then, yeah, fully motorized lens for everything. Lens memories if you want to set up 2 different screen sizes. Everything feature you could basically think of is in that thing, and pretty darn good HDR support as well, with an easy-to-use slider in there if you want to make the whole image darker or brighter, from content to content. So a really nice choice. But $2,800, I'll bet he was looking at the 5040 UB because it's so much less expensive now. But it doesn't really do the things you want to do. So if $2,800 is just too much, you weren't looking to pay that much, there's basically a DLP choice you could look at and an LCD choice that you could look at. The LCD choice is also an Epson. It's the Home Cinema 3800. It can do 4K 60 with HDR. But you don't get the motorized lens. The black levels aren't as black. The contrast isn't quite as high, but it's very bright. It still looks good for HDR. It's just a manual lens, and the black levels aren't quite as great, but it's $1,700 versus $2,800. It's $1,100 price difference there, and that could definitely make all the difference. If you're like, I can't stand the idea, because both of these Epsons, the Home Cinema 3800 and the 5050 UB, the panel itself, the LCD panel itself inside is 1080p, and they wobble it twice per frame when you're doing 4K. So you're actually getting 4 million pixels on screen, not 8 million pixels. It honestly doesn't matter. The ultra black part of the 5050 UB matters way more, but if you're just like, I have to have every pixel of 4K resolution on there, then there is a DLP solution at an affordable $1,600 price point. It is Optima's UHD 50X. And it is like specifically for gaming in that it has their lowest latency. It's about 23 milliseconds, but that's about as good as it gets with projectors. And the thing there is they actually give you the option with the Optima UHD 50X. You can either do 4K 60 with HDR, or you can do 1080p 120 on this projector. It can actually do the 120 hertz from game systems, but not at 4K. It doesn't have an HDMI 2.1 input, so it can't do 4K 120, but it can do 1080p 120 if you want to game that way. So potentially there, and what that one has is a 1080p DLP panel, but they wobble it 4 times a frame instead of only twice, so you actually get all 8 million pixels on your screen.
All right, so his current AV receiver is some Rance SR70008. Will he need to upgrade that too? And if so, what's a good choice? 7008, that sounds like a couple of generations ago, so I don't know if it's going to pass through all the stuff you want it to pass through.
If you want it to pass through 4K 60 with HDR, it can't. What you could conceivably, it's not very convenient with a projector, what you could conceivably do is use something like an HD Fury AVR key to separate the HDMI audio from the HDMI video and send the 4K 60 HDR video through the HD Fury AVR key straight to the projector, and then have a second HDMI cable coming out of the AVR key going to your Marantz to send the audio separately. So you could do that without upgrading your AV receiver. But if the idea is to plug your Xbox Series X into your AV receiver and have it pass along 4K 60 HDR to the projector, then you will need a new AV receiver to do that. Now, you do not need HDMI 2.1. You don't need an AV receiver that can pass that, because your projector, no matter which of these projectors you choose, is not HDMI 2.1. So, since you're used to something of the quality of a Marantz SR7008, I would probably point you to a Denon X4300H that you can get at Accessories for Less for $1,000 right now. So it will do 4K 60 HDR. It's HDMI 2.0 on the Denon X4300H.
All right. Gurinder. Gurinder's frustrating project to move his in-ceiling speakers in his basement continues. He's getting close to his deadline. And one lingering issue is that he has a telephone wire without much slack right where one of his speakers needs to be. Is there any way to just splice into that line and add some length without having to run an entirely new telephone wire? First of all, Gurinder, I didn't know you lived in the 80s. It's nice to know that people still live there and they still have landlines. Now, when you're talking on the phone, do you have one of those long curly cues, things so that you can go to the couch and lie on your stomach with your feet dangling up? And as you talk to your girlfriends and you guys talk about, who's the cutest, boy at the school or girl at the school or whatever, I'm not going to judge you. Because I'm going to be judging you on the fact that you still have a phone line. They actually found a phone line in my wall, and they said, "Do you use this?" I'm like, "No." They're like, "Cut it!" I'm like, "That's right." I'm like, no.
Isn't there like some law where you still have to have a landline to your house or something, even if it's not active? I don't know.
There may be a landline to this house, but I wouldn't know where to plug into it. And I know I know one place where I can't plug into it anymore. But this is not brain surgery. We've seen, even with Ethernet cables, you can self-terminate an Ethernet cable, and that's more complicated than this is. So to think that there is not some way of essentially cutting it, and then even if all you're doing is terminating it into a jack, which usually is what you can do easily at home, and then buying another cable and plugging it in and taking it to the next destination where you want it to go, this should not be an issue.
This is a very common thing that people used to do all the time with their phone lines, and you still can.
Back in the 1950s,
there's a little plastic device called an insulation displacement connector, which you can go to Home Depot. They pretty much only sell them in packs of 25 for $5, but that's what you do. You'll need 2 of them out of that package, because the phone line is a 2-wire system. But yeah, you put this in there, you push down on the little yellow button, it It slices itself through the insulation jacket, crimps onto the metal inside, and injects some gel to make sure that nothing ever corrodes. It's a very simple, fast thing, and you can add whatever length you need to your phone line with IDC.
IDC. I don't care. Now, Karl, just for fun, he asks, if money and crazy setup considerations were no object, what would be our dream amps? Would we get all monoblocks? He would opt for Climax Solo monoblock amps from Lin. Dude.
I mean, this is why I put it in there. Obviously, he wanted to say what he would get, so I'm not going to deny mentioning his choice.
Climax Solo monoblock. Could not pick a better name for amplifiers, because anything, monoblock amps are nothing but a masturbatory experience. So, Climax Solo.
I'm pretty sure they're $6,000 each. So, yeah.
I just would save the money on spend it on something else. I'm gonna be honest with you.
I mean, you fell down a rabbit hole when you were shopping for your Dayton, so it's not.
I did. I would probably, and I know what you're gonna say because I can see it, but I also knew what you were gonna say before I saw it.
Because it's not a surprise.
It's not a surprise. I would probably, just to be different from Rob, get the monoblock, monolith amp from. Emotiva. I would not get monoblock because
you get monolith from Monoprice.
Monolith from Monoprice. Gotcha. Just to be different. I mean, ask me a couple of years ago, I would have said Emotiva. I would have said Emotiva, but now I'm just getting these just so at least they're a little bit of the new hotness. Okay. But there's lots of very, very pretty, very expensive amps out there. I mean, logistically. He said if crazy setup considerations were no objects. Right. I mean, I just don't want that many amplifiers in my life. I just don't want a big stack of amps because I'm the only one that's going to care about it, and my wife's going to just get mad at me about it. So, have one and be done. That's what I would do.
All right. Well, he said money's no object, crazy setup considerations no object. So I'm going for ATI's highest end signature AT6000 series. It's 300 watts per channel. They're essentially monoblocks inside of this thing, but they share two power supplies in there. Evidence of that, to run a signature series AT6000 model amplifier from ATI, you need two 20 amp power cords. So, that's not the normal thing I would go for in everyday life, but he said money and crazy setup considerations are no problem.
So does that mean that you have to have two separate circuits run to that same outlet?
Yeah.
That's dumb. I just think that's dumb.
It's still less than monoblocks.
I think that you don't have speakers, and I'm talking to all of you people. No one has speakers that need this, but it is what it is. Whether you're in a movie theater, whatever. All right, so what are our thoughts on the $5,500 110th anniversary edition AVR 8110 receiver from Denon? A110 receiver from Denon. Other than having HDMI 2.1 connections, just a single input, and DTS X Pro out of the box, is it really different than the X8500H? I mean, not really, according to the article that you linked from Audioholics. It's not. It sounds like it's almost exactly the same, except it's got the faceplate. And I have no problems with this, by the way. It's people selling limited edition things that have nothing but cosmetic changes, but limited runs is not exactly been invented by Denon just now.
No.
I mean, I'm like, these things happen, and people tell me like this. There's a guy at the climbing gym. I have no idea what his background is, whatever. The guy owns two Ferraris. So he comes in with one and his daughter most of the time. But every once in a while, he drives a different Ferrari. And I was like, oh, I thought you got you got a new Ferrari. He goes, no, that's the other one. That's the blah, 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 blah edition. I was like, and that's what I heard too. Blah, 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 blah. Like, I have no idea. It was important enough for him to buy a second Ferrari. So, but for me, I'm like, I'm just as impressed now as I was when I found out you had two Ferraris. So whatever, that's fine.
So I mean, it has the HDMI 2.1 connection, but still just the single input, which the X8500H will have available for it. You can send that in and have it upgraded to that. It'll have DTS:X Pro out of the box for the A110, but the X8500 will also get that as a firmware update. And actually, there was a quite disappointing thing with the A110, in my opinion, which is that it does not have the 2 Audyssey presets. Because the X8500H doesn't have it, and this is an X8500H. So it's an X8500H with all the upgrades that the X8500H will get in terms of features, but nothing more than that. So yeah, it's mostly a cosmetic difference. And they're just marking the occasion. 110 years.
That's fine. So Dolby's Brett Crockett was recently quoted as saying we, Dolby, want Atmos to be the new stereo. This was in response to the release of Dolby's new height virtualization processing for 2-channel setups, and further efforts to expand Atmos for headphones, Atmos on mobile, Atmos music, Atmos for games, and everything else that doesn't require oodles of speakers and a movie soundtrack. What are our thoughts? I thought there used to be a Dolby button on my cassette recorder, and that's they when they get back to
Dolby
that.
noise reduction, almost certainly.
Yeah, yeah. They want to get back to there being a button on everything that has their name on it is what they want, and I mean, of course, that's what they want. That's what every company wants.
But more than that, to me, the thing that's really valuable here is they didn't really go through it in the article that was talking about it, but the point is object-based audio. If we're going to go to a future where everything that we're creating is object-based audio instead of channel-based audio, you need some kind of decoder for that. And of course, Atmos being Dolby's object-based system, they're like, hey, let's just have that be the standard now, right? That if it's object-based audio, it's Dolby Atmos, and that's it.
Do we really think we are going to go towards object-based audio for 2-channel?
Yeah, why not?
For the simple reason that between 2 channels, the object is like...
No, but you can still have the object metadata for the full 3D soundscape, and then it just gets played out of whichever setup you have, even if that's all the way down to 2-channel. So I'm all in favor of things moving to object-based audio. To me, it makes all the sense in the world. And yeah, I mean, obviously Dolby is right business-wise to say, hey, if we're going to go object-based audio, let's make our version of it the standard. And they're doing a pretty good job of it, to be honest. I mean,
I'm less in favor of this, and my reasoning is from a more execution standpoint than anything else. For the most part, 2-channel audio, especially music that the kids are listening to these days, get off my lawn. They, the biggest thing that they're worried about is loudness and bass. They don't really care about anything else, right? They're not steering things anywhere. And the object, if you made it into object, I feel like they would just default to essentially channels, left and right, and that would be it.
Maybe.
And even then, even if you did get a designer or a mixer or whatever who did care about objects and trying to make things sound like they were moving or whatever, I feel like most of the time the implementation would be poor to detrimental.
But I mean, even if someone is saying, I only plan to play this out of 2 speakers, it's just the interface that they use to make their mix. Now they use a little joystick or a mouse interface to move the object left to right, because you're still going to have stereo panning, even if that's the only way they're thinking of it. So instead of doing it all via levels, which is how channels work, now you can just move the object with your mouse or your joystick, and that's the way people get used to mixing audio now. And then it's all object-based, and it's all Atmos, and Dolby is happy.
Okay. All right. I hear you.
Yeah.
Jeff asks, does HDMI stand for hot damn mess of an interface? So most of the time, yes, it does. Jeff has the JVC RS540 projector and the Vizio P65F1 These are connected to his Denon X4300H, and the sources are an NVIDIA Shield and the Panasonic UB820 Ultra HD Blu-ray player. The sources are plugged into Denon with a very short, certified premium high-speed HDMI cables for mono price, and those seem fine. His Vizio is connected to Denon via an expensive fiber optic HDMI cable. The projector is connected to the Denon via a 30-foot active HDMI cable for mono price. Did you look at the arrows to make sure that they're going? Sorry. The HDMI boards in his Denon and his TV have been replaced more than once. He lives in Florida in a house that was built before bonded grounding terminals were mandatory. Some type of surge managed to kill the HDMI boards on his TV and his Denon multiple times, so that's what led to the expensive fiber optic HDMI cable between those two. He has done what he can in terms of plugging all the components into the same APC J35 battery backup unit now and running his cable line through the ABC as well. He hasn't had any blown HDMI boards since, but he presently has to call into an electrician to get them to check his entire grounding situation and hopefully get that sorted.
Good.
That's a good idea. Meanwhile, things are not running smoothly. His JVC connection stopped working. That's the active HDMI cable. It had been 4 years, so he tried a replacement cable, which worked at first, but then died shortly after installation. He found a fiber optic HDMI cable on discount, so he tried that with the JVC, and it functioned, but not at high bit rates. It also cut out completely whenever he turned on his fluorescent lights. This house is unclean.
Right. Yeah.
So he tried a third active HDMI cable and it's been working fine, except he can only get his Vizio TV to work by either having both the JVC and the TV on at the same time or physically unplugging the JVC projector. If the JVC is plugged in, but in standby, his TV won't sync. So what can he do? Is there some way to get his setup working reliably? You're going to need a young priest and an old priest.
So,
and a little lady to come in there and look real creepy about stuff.
So putting aside the HDMI cables themselves, I mean, it seems like he has two HDMI cables that are capable of functioning now. So
it does seem that way.
In the case of he mentioned he found a fiber optic cable that was on discount. Now, there were plenty of fiber optic cables that were limited to 10.2 gigabits per second. And I think that's the case because you try to plug that into the UB820 and the UB820's menu comes out at 4K 60 12-bit, which needs more than 10.2 gigabits per second, so you just get a blank screen and nothing's going to show up from your Panasonic player's menu if you try to plug it into a cable that can't do 18 gigabits per second. So I think that was probably the case with the discounted fiber optic cable, that was just limited, but it seems like he has two cables that function now. So the solution that we know has worked for other people is with your Denon X4300H, its remote that came with it doesn't have this function, but Harmony remotes can have a dedicated button to let you choose HDMI monitor output 1 only, or HDMI monitor output 2 only, or HDMI monitor outputs 1 and 2 together. You can do that with a Harmony and just add that to a sequence or an activity to say only output from the Denon, either HDMI monitor 1 or monitor 2. Whereas with the regular remote that came with your Denon, you can do it inside of the settings menu. You can go in there and choose which monitor output is active, but it's kind of hard to do if you can't see what you're doing on the screen via the menu. So a Harmony remote here and those dedicated buttons that Harmony has for Denon receivers to let you choose which monitor output and only that monitor output is active, we know has worked for other people who are trying to do the projector and flat panel setup just like you are.
Okay.
Yeah.
There we go. Problem solved. Glad I could help. Just tell them not to put the holy water directly on the electronics.
Right.
Do that. Nick appreciated a recommendation for Audio Engine desktop speakers, but at $270 a pair for their smallest A2 Plus model. By the way, they put pluses long before Disney ever invented pluses. These guys invented pluses behind numbers and stuff.
Blame them.
So they were going along just fine, under the radar with their little plus system, and nobody was copying them. Then Disney Plus comes along, and boom, they should sue. Good luck Sue inducing, by the way. That's really going to work out well for you. The smallest A2 Plus model, that's a bit more than he was looking to spend. Audioholics posted a favorable review of a pair of the larger PreSonus Aris desktop monitors, saying that they are neutral and accurate. And there are two smaller PreSonus models also with their favorable reviews online. The smallest 3.5-inch model is only $100 for a pair, and the 4.5-inch model, which has a very similar output and extension specs as the audio engines, is only $200 a pair. So would we insist that it's audio engine or nothing, or do we think these less expensive PreSonus models could be worth a try? Well, I mean, I use a PreSonus outboard, preamp.
Yeah.
For the stuff, and that's a perfectly good thing. These speakers look like speakers. I mean,
they look like desktop monitors. They look perfectly reasonable to me. I mean, hey, if you're buying them from a place where you can return them, I have zero problem with giving them a try. Absolutely give them a try. Yeah, totally. There you go.
And if price is this much of an issue, then, first of all, I wish people would just tell us what they're, not surprise us with the prices. Like, I only want to spend $3 a pair for these speakers. Well, I'm sorry,
not quite
dude.
That little.
Yeah, but these both sound like reasonable stuff. And what's wrong with the Aris ones? I guess they get even more expensive.
Oh, they were just like $200. Yeah, they were the 8-inch ones that Audioholics reviewed. So he's not looking for ones that big.
Yeah, if you're looking at the $200 a pair one, the 4.5-inch.
Yeah.
I mean, you're saving a little bit of money over the audio engine. You're probably not going to get based on the number of inputs and stuff on the back of this thing, you're not getting as much connectivity as you could get with the audio engines. But if you don't need it, these are desktop monitors. It's not like we're sitting here worried about you getting the best possible audio fidelity. It's not home theater. It's not a critical listening environment. So knock yourself out, man. Have good. Tell us how you like it, and then maybe we'll recommend it to other people.
For sure.
All right, let's do one more, and then we're going to finish. Mark has a setup that was cutting edge at the time that he got it, but he's now faced with a bunch of formats that aren't fully supported by his gear. He's got a JVC X500 projector that can accept 4K, but it has HDCP 4.1.
1.4.
I'm sorry, 1.4. My dyslexia has kicked in. And it cannot do HDR, and its 4K resolution supports limited to 24 or 30 frames per second. He has a Denon X4300H Receiver with the same sort of 4K support as his JVC, and it has processing for 11 speakers, but that was for Pro Logic 2Z and Audyssey DSX and not Atmos. For his sources, he has an Oppo 203, a Roku Ultra, and a Logitech Squeeze Box. There's a glass from the past. With Logitech Music Server running on his computer, all of his music in Apple lossless. So, I remember this question. It's really, really complicated, and I think the answer is also going to end up being complicated or easy, depending on how much money you want to spend. So, at the moment, his Oppo 203 is plugged into a monoprice HDCP converter. This allows him to play Ultra HD Blu-ray discs in 4K resolution, and the Oppo does a great job of converting HDR to SDR. Also, he's using a scope screen, which is code for, cinescope, the 2.4 to 1 aspect ratio. And the Oppo lets him move the subtitles if there are any. And on top of that, he plugs his Roku Ultra into the Oppo, and that solves some issues. First, Roku gets to share the HDCP converter this way, and second, some of Roku's apps are locked at 60 frames per second, even though the Roku hardware can support 24 frames per second output, but the Oppo can use its video processing to convert things.
There you go. Hardware is capable. Apps, not so much.
But his Denon 4520 seems to be on its last legs anytime it is moved, even slightly. First of all, why are you moving it? I can't remember the last time I moved my receiver. Like,
maybe he dusts.
At all.
It must
How
be
much do you move a receiver when you dust? That's ridiculous.
I don't know. I think he's looking for an excuse to upgrade.
It sounds that way. Anytime it is moved even slightly, it cuts out. There's a short just back there someplace. Something's crossed over something else. Maybe you need to dust. Maybe that's the problem. The only thing that seems to fix it is raising the front of it by about an inch and then dropping it with a thunk. As crazy as it sounds, that always gets it working again, but he's thinking that isn't the best situation. I honestly do believe you just have a speaker wire or something back
I mean, it's
there
a loose connection somewhere. I mean, it's the Han Solo solution to his Millennium Falcon and Empire, right? You just bang on it and it comes back. That's a loose connection somewhere.
And naturally, he's drawn to all the latest features like Atmos, Audyssey Editor app, and the latest format support. So he's thinking a new AV receiver might be in the cards. He could afford something in the $1,000 to $1,500 range. But then he's wondering that if the new receiver might allow him to sell his Oppo 203, since people are still paying upwards of $900 to $1,000 for them, and he's kept it in excellent condition as long as a different Ultra HD Blue player could handle the HDR to SDR conversion, and the new receiver could handle converting his Roku Ultra's output. He wouldn't need the Oppo anymore, right? What do we think? I think that you are opening a bag of worms here. That's what I think. I think that you're precariously balanced in a relationship between your devices that is unhealthy, but is somehow create a stasis that's allowed everything to work perfectly.
Right.
And you wanting to get something new is going to send you down the rabbit hole of spending. Now, this is not unlike having a kitchen remodel foisted upon you and then having your wife say, well, if we're going to do all that, why don't we just, and then money just evaporates.
So, I mean, my honest inclination is to keep your Oppo 203.
I think so too.
Even if you upgrade your AV receiver, because yes, I mean, if you want Atmos and all those types of things, which obviously your Ultra HD Blu-rays and several of your streaming services have, then yeah, you could upgrade your AV receiver. That's entirely reasonable. I would point you to the X4300H in your case. You definitely don't need an AV receiver with HDMI 2.1 ports. So $1,000 accessories for less, an X4300H would do very nicely. Stays in the same series as you already are used to from Denon, but yeah, to me, it's a little bit of the relying on the video processing of the AV receiver to handle the conversion of your Roku. Because you're trying to get your Roku to output 4K. And I'm like, I'm not aware that you can downgrade the signal. Like, if the signal coming in is higher than what you actually want to send out of the Denon, I think it only goes up. I don't think you can force it to convert 4K 60 down. I don't know if that's an option. I'm not certain on it. Maybe you could do some more research on that. My inclination is to think that that's not really an option there. Then there's also, you wouldn't get the subtitle movement. Maybe I think the Panasonic UB9000 has that. But you know what? You might as well keep your Oppo because the UB9000 is $1,200. So it doesn't make sense to sell your Oppo for $1,000 and then buy a $1,200 player. So I mean, the Sony X800M2 is a reasonably good HDR to SDR converter for Ultra HD Blu-rays. You could do that at a decent price without giving up a ton of performance there compared to your Oppo. But the other feature, it doesn't have the video processing built in that your Oppo has. I don't think it has the subtitle movement that the Oppo or the UB9000 has. So like
that part of that signal chain, that whole arm of it, I don't think that's something you can mess with. You cannot fix that until you get a different projector.
Yeah, when you get a different projector, then all of this kind of goes away. But for now,
then you can plug things directly into the Denon, and that's fine. I think that part of it has to stay.
Yeah.
I don't see how you make that go away.
The Oppo's just so darn nice,
It is, and that whole ability to plug something into it and then use the video processing within it is not something you can find. It was unheard of before, and it's still
plus,
unheard of.
I'm pretty sure the Oppo is doing HDR to SDR conversion for your Roku Ultra that you've plugged into it, and there's nothing else besides an HD Fury that's going to do that. And to get the HDR to SDR conversion from an HD Fury, you're looking at the $400 unit. So by the time you get a new Ultra HD Blu-ray player and a $400 HD Fury to get you back to and you sell the Oppo, you're not coming out ahead. So just keep the Oppo. Keep the Oppo.
So he figures he'll most likely get a new Denon, and that would have HEOS built in. So Could he use that instead of his Logitech Squeezebox? All of the marketing seems to be about streaming music services, but is there a way to play your own content via HEOS off of a server? And if so, can he do it with gapless playback? He listens to a fair amount of classical music, so gapless playback is important to him. So even my 4000, my previous receiver, was capable of grabbing music off of a server if the server was online. So grabbing it off the server and playing it through your receiver is not a problem, or should not be a problem, unless they've changed something seriously in the last 4 or 5 generations. Now, getting it to your HEOS, I mean, I don't know that HEOS has much to do with this other than sending it to speakers. I thought that's what HEOS did.
Well, I mean, HEOS is Denon's built-in wireless music thing. Whether that's streaming services like Spotify and Tidal and all that, which is part of that system. It's their whole house audio system is HEOS.
Yeah, but
Denon.
HEOS is grabbing that stuff and then sending it out to speakers, I thought.
But what it does have is DLNA support. So as long as you're fine with selecting a DLNA server, which can definitely run on your PC, very low, requirements as far as processing on all that, and HEOS does support gapless playback via DLNA. Just make sure that the DLNA server software that you select also supports gapless playback. Both of them have to, but HEOS can as a playback device via DLNA. So yeah, definitely possible both ways. Matt B's is super short. Can we hit it? It's a 2-word answer.
No.
All right.
Oh, wait. Yes. Wait. Those were the 2 words. Matt. Last week, Matt asked about the Canton in-wall speakers and asked for other in-wall options for $200 speakers or less, just like Matt H.
Yeah, we had 2 Matts asking for $200 each in-wall speakers. Got confusing.
We said HSU or RBH, and he will consider those up front behind the screen. But it turns out for surrounds, he's going to need to use on-walls instead. So are there good on-wall options to match the in-walls we suggested? So for RBH, you just get RBH speakers to go on the walls.
They have their on-wall ultras, but they're $400 each, so not inexpensive. You wanted $200 per speakers. So if you go with the HSU in-walls, which are horn-loaded, I would match them up quite easily with Klipsch's on-wall reference premiere. It'd be the RP140 is the on-wall Klipsch, and it's $200 each, so it fits the price, and it'll match pretty nicely. Done.
With the HSU, right? But so that being said, let's just go back to the RBH. So RBH finding $200 each speakers from RBH is not impossible, but it's pretty hard. But know this: if you find one, it will totally match other RBH speakers. Their entire line, for the most part, they all have the same design, a sonic design. With them, so you can mix and match RBH speakers willy-nilly, and other than capabilities, output, as far as output, how loud they can get, and extension, low and high, overall they're going for a very flat, neutral sound, and they do that with every single speaker they make.
Yeah.
So there we go. Well, who we got left?
We have Ilongo, Daz, J.A. and J.R. I put together because they both asked a very similar question, at least to start. Andrew L., he's the fellow who sent us our model spaceships, and Aris. Those are the names that are on the list. And then, of course, questions that came in Monday, Tuesday. I haven't put on the list yet, but I should have those emails.
All right. Again, this is AVRant. If you want to get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. We want to again thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank our 125 patrons, including Paul, over at patreon.com. Thank you, peoples.
For sure. Patreon.com/AVRant podcast for anybody who'd like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation. Huge thanks to our 125 patrons. And Paul, thank you for being one of them.
We also want to thank our notes of gratitude from Chris, Terry, Alongo, Michael, Mark, Carl, Vince, Jay, and Aris.
Yeah, I'll just repeat the names: Chris, Terry, Ilongo, Michael, Mark, Carl, Vince, Jay, and Aris. Thank you very much for those notes of gratitude and encouragement. We really do appreciate it, and we very much appreciate everyone who continues to listen and send in your questions. Thank you all very much.
For AVRant, I'm Tom Andrew.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.